Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today in the second panel discussion series. My name is Grant Tobias and I'll be your host for today, as well as the moderator for the panel discussion. In today's session, we will look at funding opportunities for SMMEs and businesses in general. While we explore different types of funding options available in the market, their basic compliance requirements, as well as the minimum and maximum funding thresholds. Today, we have 4 industry leaders that join us in the session. We have Bongo Giyose, who's the regional manager of SEFA. Thank you for joining us today, Bongo. We also have Bongolethu Bacela, the regional manager of the National Empowerment Fund, also known as the NEF. Thank you for joining us, Bongolethu. And Siviwe Makasi, who's a specialist at the Eastern Cape Development Corporation, also known as ECDC. Thank you for joining us today, Siviwe. And also we are to be joined by Shaun, Govender, who's the director of Emerge Closing the Gap Fund. He will join us shortly. I would just like to give each of the panelists an opportunity to give a brief introduction and overview of their respective organizations, and I'd like to hand over to Bongo Giyose. Over to you.
Thank you, Grant, and good morning to our panelists and all the entrepreneurs that have joined us today on this panel discussion. As Grant has already alluded to, my name is Bongo Giyose, Regional Manager of SEFA, which is the Small Enterprise Finance Agency. So we are a development finance institution that operates within the funding space. Our executive authority is the Department of Small Business. So we champion all the different programs that the DSBD wants to do for the local economies. So we do funding right through the different spectrum. Our minimum loan requirements is 50,000 rands, and we go all the way up to 15 million rands. So it's quite a wide base in terms of our funding spectrum. And we fund all types of businesses from, your franchise businesses, your manufacturing businesses. And we also have programs. We have a new program called the Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Program, which is known as TREP. This is specifically for your township and rural businesses, and that is from 50,000 rands up to 1 million rands. It's quite a really exciting program. It allows the previously disadvantaged and people that were outside the mainstream of business to enter the main economy, and it funds your micro businesses like your chisanyamas, your butcheries, your textile industries, your micro bakeries, your car washes, all the sort of micro businesses that you'd find in our rural and township areas. And then we also have your bigger kind of funding, which is in our manufacturing space. We've got a program specifically for that. It's called SEMP, so the Small Enterprise Manufacturing Program. And we fund, your manufacturing businesses, your agro-processing businesses. And that's also been quite a successful program that we've been running for the past 2 years, where we fund, your brick manufacturers, your steel fabricators, quarries, and we've done a lot of business in the Eastern Cape through that program. We've got lots and lots of funding opportunities, and we hope that with this panel discussion we can shed some more light so that people can take advantage of all these opportunities that are out there. As SEFA in the Eastern Cape, we have 3 regional offices. We are based in East London. We've got an office in Mthatha, and we've got an office in Port Elizabeth. And we work quite closely with our sister company, which is SEDA. SEDA helps entrepreneurs to package their funding proposals and help them to become, let's call it, bankable. And through our partnership with SEDA, we assist a lot of entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Fantastic, Bongo. Thank you so much for that insight. I'm sure that our listeners out there appreciate the oversight that you've given. We'd like to go through to Bongolethu from the NEF. Over to you, Bongolethu.
Good morning. Thank you, Grant. Good morning to everyone, the panel members, and to everyone that has joined us. My name is Bongolethu Bacela. I am the regional manager of the NEF here in the Eastern Cape. I'm basically, I like to call myself a CEO of NEF in the province. I'm in charge of all the NEF activities, from deal sourcing all the way to executing the transactions and also post-investment management of the deals that we've done in the province. So, like Bongo, there are a number of sectors that we participate in: manufacturing, franchising, tourism, property space, student accommodation. So we finance a number of businesses that operate in various sectors of the economy. The only thing maybe I need to mention that businesses that we won't support are what government calls SIN businesses. Anything that's got to do with manufacturing and selling of tobacco, alcohol, things like taverns, shipping, liquor stores, we won't finance. We also don't participate in or help businesses that operate in gambling, selling and manufacturing of guns and ammunition. So all those businesses are known or categorized as SIN businesses. So we don't assist such businesses with funding. And anything else that I have not mentioned, as a SIN business, we would likely support that kind of business, provided that there is commercial merit, of course, because we offer loans that must be repaid back to the NEF so that we can use those funds to finance other businesses. So I look forward to engaging and maybe taking questions from all the entrepreneurs that have joined us. I don't want to take up too much time introducing myself. I know there's other members that need to do the introduction as well. So I'll stop there for now, but we'll take questions a bit later. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that insight as well there, Bongolethu. That's Bongolethu from the NEF. Next up, we have Siviwe Makasi, who's a specialist at ECDC. Siviwe, over to you if you can just give us an overview of the organization and the funding and so forth. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant, and thanks to the panel and also to all other viewers as well. I'm standing here for ECDC. ECDC is Eastern Cape Development Corporation. Our shareholder is the Department of Economic Development. They are our funder. We've got 5 regional offices in the Eastern Cape, which is the PE office, the East London office, the Butterworth region, the Mthatha region, and the Queenstown region, and 2 satellite offices in Alwal North and Mount Aleph. The mandate of ECDC is to develop the SMMEs, both financially and non-financially. Starting with the non-financial support, we offer the trainings, the mentoring, the business plan development, the marketing material, which is your website development, the brochures, your social media platform handles, if you require, because the COVID has taught us that those are very important aspects of handling your business. Coming to the funding side, We have two currently. We have two portfolios that we are running. Unfortunately, the other two portfolios are on hold until such time that we receive the instruction from the board to carry on with them. The two on hold are the term loans and the Power Plus loans, which are merely on the startups and franchises and expansions. The two that we are currently funding are contract-based portfolios. One which is the Nexus. The Nexus is catering for when you get a supply and deliver purchase orders. And the second one that we are continuing with is the contractor's workflow loan, which is when the contractor is awarded a tender to build a school or clinic or the roads projects. We provide the financial assistance thereof. And also we've got two incentives. One will say those are grants, but that name we were shying away from the grants name. But although you don't pay them back, but although we call them the incentives. The first incentive is the Imvaba Fund, which is for the co-ops. We provide financial support up to 600,000 for the co-ops to buy for them the equipment for their business and the materials that they use to produce whatever they produce in their line of business. The second incentive is the Jobs Fund, which is for the jobs which are in distress due to the pandemic situation we found ourselves in. Those SMMEs that are on the verge of laying off the workers. So that incentive is to save jobs, which is at about 10,000 rand per job, and has got an element of a working capital also. Yeah, it's for the jobs, it's for the SMMEs in distress. Yeah, those so far those are the products that ECDC is offering currently from the funding side. And also we've got the TII, Trade, Industry and unit, which is dealing with the exports. When if you are in a business of exporting your goods overseas, there is a unit, there is a special unit which is dealing with that. They take you through and link you up with the businesses abroad which will require your services. So they take you and link you up with them, and you do the business with them. That's another unit that we do have at ECDC. So far, I would like to stop there and give others a chance to continue with the presentations, and we'll take questions at a later stage.
Thank you for that insight there, Siviwe. Much appreciated. I'm sure the audience also appreciates that overview. Last but not least, we have Shaun Govender, who is the director of the Emerge Closing the Gap Fund. We'd like to just cross over to Shaun right now. Over to you, Shaun.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Grant. Just some background. So, firstly, thank you to the participants or the presenters for helping us to speak today. I'm also the CEO of the business place, and one of the key elements to this kind of work or presentation we're trying to do is to try and get key like-minded individuals to try and work together in sort of a collaboration to help the entrepreneurs, because as we know, one entity can't do all the work for everybody. So it's kind of helpful to work together and collaborate with each other to see how we make a difference in the entrepreneurs' lives, especially from a funding perspective. So the business place, as you would know, there's 3 centres in Port Elizabeth. And in these centres, we have business development support, incubating specific sector-based specific programs. And one of the key elements we recently added into our bouquet of services is through our partner company called Emerge Group. So the business place started a company called Emerge because business place is an NGO. Emerge is a PTY. We started a fund to actually help entrepreneurs. Previously, the business place used to try and facilitate finance through other funders to banks and others, and we had to leave the timing to the development finance houses, where clients started getting frustrated if they didn't get answers and stuff like that. So we then pursued to get our own fund. The fund is capitalized through National Treasury and which is the Jobs Fund part, and then we managed to get a private sector funding to match that. So the fund particularly supports SMMEs. It's a 0 to 5 million rand fund. Any company looking at expansion, to buy capital, to grow their business, to create jobs, for example, agricultural businesses creating jobs, manufacturing concerns, and the reignition of the tourism sector as well in Port Elizabeth. One could apply to our fund. It's quite simple to apply to our fund. It's emerge-group.co.za, or just walk into our centres at the business place in Vierplaas, Uitenhage and Quanto Towers in central Port Elizabeth. You can speak to our regional director there, Grant Tobias, who manages the region there for us, and then he'll link you up with us and we can take the process forward. And who qualifies? So it is a fund capitalized by government, so it's very similar to the NYDA, ECDC, and so forth. And women in business, youth, obviously, and it has to be 51% black owned as well. There's a preference towards women and youth, not only, but it's a preference as well there. And as I said, if there's a big element of job creation, we look at those kind of applications as well. The good thing with this particular fund, it's a private company that handles it, so our turnaround time is a bit more quicker. We understand that the other entities and agencies have a process the same like us, but sometimes we could be much quicker. We don't have to go through the same bureaucracy because it's a bit of a private sort of fund. So you can get applications on emerge-group.co.za. So I'll stop there and then we'll take questions later.
Thank you for that overview there, Shaun. That was Shaun, Govender from Emerge, Closing the Gap Fund. Right. So small and micro enterprises play a major role in most economies, particularly in developing countries, and these SMMEs account for the majority of businesses worldwide and are important contributors to job creation and global economic development. They represent about 90% of business and more than 50% of employment worldwide. Formal SMMEs contribute to about 40% of national income, that's the GDP, in emerging economies. Now, these numbers significantly are higher when informal SMMEs are also included, especially in South Africa. The global economic landscape has undergone a seismic shift since the arrival of COVID-19 almost 2 years ago. However, while the pandemic caused significant business challenges, it also triggered and accelerated many innovations as organizations adapted to change, often simply to survive. Funds are thus normally required at the startup or pivot stages of SMMEs, as mentioned previously. Now, furthermore, many new graduates from our tertiary institutions or unemployed individuals do not necessarily have adequate knowledge on how to access these funds to support their startups or existing businesses. Now, SMMEs are less likely to be able to obtain bank loans than large firms. Instead, they would ordinarily rely on internal funds or cash from friends and family to launch and initially run their enterprises. The end result of all of this creative thinking is that business owners now widely acknowledge the necessity of pivoting, repositioning, or expanding their operations in order to ensure sustainable growth in the future. Access to finance is a key constraint to SMME growth, and it's cited as the most it is the most cited obstacle facing SMMEs to grow their businesses in emerging markets and developing countries. In an effort to improving SMMEs' access to finance and finding innovative solutions to unlock sources of capital, we bring you this session today to learn about the various development funding institutions, as the panelists that have spoken previously that exist, and what funding is accessible from them. I will open up the following discussion points to the floor and get feedback from each of our panelists in turn. All right. To all of you, can you please provide a brief overview of the various categories of funding that's available within your respective organizations, whether it's industry specific, and who would typically qualify for the funding you have available? Bongo from SEFA.
Thanks again, Grant. So in terms of our funding initiatives, we've got a number of programs, as I might have alluded to before. But as an overview, we provide funding from 50,000 rands up to 15 million. We've got a number of funds and programs that SEFA is busy administering. As I said earlier, we've got the Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Program. This is from 50,000 rands up to 1 million rands. And the exciting thing about that fund is that it also has a grant portion that is up to 100,000 rands. So that fund is blended. It's loan and a grant of up to 100,000 rands for 1 million rands. And it's got a very favorable interest rate, which is actually fixed at 5%. And the people who would qualify for that fund is South African citizens. The business must be owned by a South African citizen. It must operate within the South African borders. And for the Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Program, it must be operating within a rural community or a township. And this is for, as I said earlier, for our micro businesses, your textiles, your chisanyamas, your butcheries, your micro bakeries. Those are the kind of applications we're looking for. In terms of our other programs, we also have a manufacturing program, which is from 50,000 rands up to 15 million. That also, as I said, it's for your manufacturing space, anything that is manufacturing. So it's quite broad. It includes your agro processing, your block manufacturers, your cement products, your quarrying, which is your open cost mining. We also have, your term loans, which is normally used for our franchising space or your expansions of businesses, your startups. We do a lot of startups as well. We also look at all the different sectors from your tourism space, right through. I think the only thing that I might have to add is our exclusions. My exclusions are similar to NEF's exclusions, so we don't fund sin industry as well. Your alcohol, your tobacco products, your gambling, your sex trade, anything that's got to do with child labor, your ammunition, we don't fund those. One of our other exclusions is your primary agriculture. So we don't fund primary agriculture. We do fund secondary agriculture, which will form into your agro processing kind of businesses. Within the agricultural space, the only ones that we do look at is your cash crops, which could be your spinaches, your cabbages, and things like that. But key to that, you do need to have an offtake agreement with an existing supplier. So typically those businesses would fund a lot of those in the Transkei, where you've got your micro farmers who are supplying fresh produce to your spas or your retailers on a fixed basis. Because SEFA is a cash flow based funding lending institution, we place a lot of reliance on your cash flow projections. So we need to be able to satisfy ourselves that if we do extend lending funding to you, your business operations will be able to repay the loan first and to be viable and to be able to, you know, pay off all your overheads. So things like your offtake agreements and contracts are very, very important for us to be able to, you know, satisfy ourselves that indeed you will be able to repay the loan. So yeah, in short, we fund right across all the different industries, and our loans are from 50,000 rands right up to 15 million rands. And we fund all industries except the ones that I have mentioned earlier. And it's open to all South Africans. We also do have our priority, individuals, women, youth-owned businesses. We also have specific funds for people living with disabilities. It's called the Amavulandlela Fund, which also is quite got some nice favorable lending rates, which is also fixed at 5%. It also has a grant portion that's up to, I think, about 20%. We also have a specific fund for our military veterans, which is called Inyamazane Fund. And we also have a youth fund, which is called the Youth Challenge Fund, which we're busy with. So we fund everyone, but we do have some priority individuals, which I've just mentioned. It's just our women, youth, people living with disabilities, and our military veterans. Thanks.
Fantastic, Bongo. Thank you for that. I'm sure everyone appreciates all the insight that you've given there in the different types of funding options that you're available for the various designated groups. And yeah, I do believe that you mentioned a 20% grant there. I think that would be referred to as a soft loan, if I'm not mistaken. Correct.
Yeah, correct. It is a grant, but it has certain criteria that we look at. So we look at how many jobs you're creating, where you're trading. There's a matrix that we use. So it is given to you as a grant, but if you do not adhere to the different criteria, it can be converted back into a loan. So there is a responsibility on the entrepreneur side to stick to the guidelines and the conditions of the grant. So it is a conditional grant.
Fantastic. Thank you for the clarity on that one. Appreciate it very much. Right, let's go over to Bongolethu from NEF. Same question. A brief overview of the various categories of the funding available within your respective organizations, industry specific, and who would typically qualify for funding you have available.
So similar to SEFA, we assist the same priority groups, women, youth, rural-based businesses. Maybe the only difference will be the size, the quantum of the funding. Our loans start from 250 all the way up to 75 million, and we finance a number of businesses or businesses that operate in various sectors of the economy, as I mentioned earlier, ranging from franchising to property to manufacturing, and we cover things such as your expansion finance. We have startup loans. We do also acquisitions, management buyouts. That's what we assist with those as well. They only maybe another difference between us and the SEFA is that we also partnered with some departments of the government. For example, we have a fund with the Department of Tourism, which assists businesses that operate in that sector, where the qualifying person or groups can get a grant up to 50% of the funding that is approved. So it's conditional. You can't apply for the grant portion only. So let's say you're looking to acquire a business that operates in the tourism space for 10 million rands. We would then, if that funding is approved, we would convert up to 5 million rands of the 10 million rands to a grant. So you can't then come to the NEF and say, I only need the grant portion from the NEF, I don't want the loan portion. They go hand in hand together.
Sure.
But it's up to a maximum. It's 50% of the approved amount up to a maximum of 5 million rands. So maybe to explain it further, if an applicant comes to us looking for 20 million rands facility to expand their tourism business, we will then 50% of 20 million rands is obviously 10 million rands, but you can't get 10 million rands of a grant. We would limit it up to 5 million rands. So that's what we mean when we say 50% of the approved amount up to 5 million rands. So the grant portion will be limited. Should the 50% be above 5 million rands, the grant will be limited to 5 million rands. So that's another program that we have. We also have another program with the Department of the DTI, where we've set up a manufacturing fund. We call it the Black Business Manufacturing Fund, BBMF, where we assist businesses that manufacture basically anything except bricks. It could be aluminium products, glasses, plastic products, anything. There we have a fixed rate on the loans that we approve, which is 2.5%, and it's limited up to 10 million rands. So it can be 250 up to 10 million rands, and we charge a fixed rate of 2.5% over the period of the loan. It's not 1 year or 2 years, it's over a period of the loan. So if you get a facility for 5 years, the rate will be fixed at 2.5% for the duration of that loan. And we also had another fund, but I think we've exhausted that fund, where it's called EDF, Economic Distress Fund, where we're assisting businesses that suffered as a result of COVID, where we're also giving them loans up to 10 million rands. Similar, the rate was about 1.5% fixed for the duration of the loan, but I think that fund has now been exhausted. There you had to prove that the business was affected by COVID in terms of revenues, where we were covering all the expenses that the business had incurred or continue to incur. We maybe lastly, we also have another fund that I need to mention, where it's called Women Empowerment Fund. That fund basically assists businesses owned by women. Minimum shareholding there must be 51%, and is also limited to 10 million rands. That's a partnership we have with the DTI. A business can be a franchise, could be a startup or expansion finance, or even an acquisition can qualify for funding under that fund. The rate there again is 1.5%. Now, what this means in cases where we are considering a transaction that's above 10 million rands, the NEF will then top up that 10 million rands from the Women's Fund and provide the additional 5 million rands required. But that 5 million rands will be charged at normal NEF rate, which is normally around prime rate of a duration. Then the 10 million rands will come from the Women's Fund, priced at 1.5% for the duration of the fund. Again, I want to stress the point that the business, in order to be considered or qualify as a woman-owned business, the shareholding must be 51%, not just shareholding, also involvement. So it must be managed by a Black woman. We don't want someone who's just a shareholder and continues to do other things. You must manage and run the business yourself. And that's the person that we'll be interviewing when we conduct due diligence. So we need to get comfortable that the jockey we're financing or the main shareholder is also responsible for operating and managing that business we're funding. So maybe those are, I'll just stop there for now. But yeah, our funding goes up to 75 million rands, covering various sectors, from property to franchising, manufacturing, tourism, except what I mentioned earlier, it is called the SIN businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bongolethu. Same question I'd like to pose to you, Siviwe. If you can just give us an overview, please, of the various categories that are funding that are available within your organization, and whether it's industry specific and who would typically qualify for that.
Oh yeah. Thanks, Grant. I will start with the Nexus portfolio. It's a product designed to cater for SMMEs that being awarded the supply and deliver purchase orders. The minimum amount is 10,000 and can go up to 5 million. But however, it's 2.5 million. However, we can, if the amount required is more than that, we motivate for that, as we've done also for an even amount of more than that. So it can go to 5 million. Anything that you've been awarded to supply and deliver by the government departments, we cater for those orders. It doesn't go for any. It doesn't have any restriction on the industries. Secondly, the other one is workflow contractors loans, which is has got a minimum amount of 350,000 up to 10 million working capital and construction guarantee, because sometimes the contractor chooses the option of a construction guarantee when they tender. So the upper limit there is 50% guarantee and working capital, which is or the capital at all once for the full amount of 10 million. Unfortunately, with the exception of the low-cost housing projects, we don't fund those as they are not viable to ECDC. We fund ECDC is developing Eastern Cape companies, SMMEs. However, if an Eastern Cape entity SMME got work outside of Eastern Cape, we can be able to fund the contracts outside of Eastern Cape as long as the SMME is from the Eastern Cape. Also, our policy allows us, if an SMME is from outside of Eastern Cape, but got a contract to serve in the Eastern Cape, which will bring direct economical development in the Eastern Cape, we do look at those contracts. Yeah, the incentives, as I've said, is for Imvaba, is for cooperatives, which is up to 600,000, buying of products, machineries, equipment, and materials for their line of work, and also the incentives of the jobs fund. The SMME should be able to prove that they are in distress to qualify for. It's a 10,000 rand per job, and it has got an element of working capital, which is calculated based on the annual turnover of the SMME. It varies from 3% up to 5% of the turnover. However, the maximum turnover that the SMME should be making is 20 million. So SMMEs with a with an annual turnover of more than 20 million is excluded from the jobs fund. Yeah, that's all for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that insight. And now we go over to Shaun Govender from the Closing the Gap Fund. The same question posed, if you can just give us insight into that as well, please.
Thanks, Ralph. Similarly to the other funds, our fund basically also operates very similar in terms of the categories. Our fund has a sort of cap to it's from 0 to 5 million rand per applicant. It has to have sort of 51% black ownership. As I said earlier, it's preference to women, youth, and disabled individuals. And the fund is basically used. First, I must say it has to have an aspect where the SMME applying can demonstrate a big element of job creation, because the fund that has been created is basically government giving us or investing in this fund, so we can demonstrate to the investors that there is an element of job creation. So what we like looking at is businesses that are in expansion mode, that's expanding, etc. You need capital to expand, grow, and invest, especially in working capital if you need more materials, etc. to grow your business. We also look at contract financing. If you have any purchase orders, we're gladly to provide finance to fund those purchase orders. You get a lot of guys with tenders as well. We look at those tenders, but we also look at the validity of those purchase orders and tenders as well before just funding that. So there's a strict due diligence before that happens. And then we're also quite open to fund equipment, vehicles, machinery, trucks, anything to make the business obviously work. And lastly, working capital as well. So we look at working capital elements, cash flow injections, etc. So how we work is the same as the other entities, the other funds. There's a major due diligence that happens on the documentation, on the business, on the contracts. If there's equipment to be purchased, we look at the work sort of being awarded to the company as well. And if there's material to be purchased, we look at what kind of materials, we look at the validity of all of that kind of stuff. And as I said earlier, it's a normal application process, I would imagine, like the other funds as well, where there's a list of requirements, and I think maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. But obviously, there's quite a rigid application process for the funding, and I think people must understand that people applying for the funding and the SMMEs. And I'm sure all the other funds as well, we are regulated through various different regulatory legislative frameworks like the NCR and FSB. So the issues you would find is that it is quite a rigorous application progress, but it's governed by the law, you know, so it's hard to go past certain processes and stuff like that. But we'll talk a bit more when those issues come up.
You're on mute, Grant.
My apologies. All right, the second question there, what are the common challenges or hurdles that SMMEs typically encounter, making them unsuccessful in their attempts to access finance? I think we'll start in the same order that we had previously, starting with yourself, Bongo from SEFA, please. Thank you.
Thanks again, Grant. I think from SEFA's perspective, one of the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs face, and we've picked up a lot as we assess business plans, it is, you know, the business plan is normally quite a big hurdle. A lot of entrepreneurs find it difficult to, you know, conceptualize their business interests, to say exactly what they will be doing, how they'll be doing it, analyzing their external market, to analyze, you know, the business operations. It's quite difficult. There are a number of entities, for example, we work quite closely with SEDA that assists, but a lot of entrepreneurs, we find that they just leave the business plan development to the third party and they don't really get involved in it. And then when you interrogate the business plan and the financial model that has been submitted, you find that the entrepreneur knows nothing about it. He can't even tell you you know, what's in the business plan itself. So that's one of the main hurdles that we experience. So I would advise entrepreneurs to be very proactive in terms of being involved in the development of their business plans. They need to know what's in it. They need to be involved in that process so that they are able to sell it. Sometimes you even find where you phone an applicant and say, can you please clarify maybe what's on page 10 of your business plan? They'll say to you, well, okay, wait, let me phone the consultant who put it together and he can explain it. But the reality is that it's not the consultant that's going to be running that business. So if you cannot sell your business plan yourself, it does not give the funder confidence that you'll be able to run that business. Another hurdle is just compliance. We lend funds that we are given by the government, and you have to be tax compliant. You must be compliant with your CIPC, your annual returns, and some entrepreneurs are not compliant with such, and it gives a huge stumbling block when you start doing your verifications and you find the applicant is not tax compliant, or they don't have a bank account, or the company is under deregistration process because the annual returns have not been paid for a couple of years. So those are, you know, the two main ones. And then also, of course, just being educated in terms of the funding criteria of the DFI you're applying at. Some applicants do not read and inform themselves as to what does SEFA actually fund, where they would come to SEFA and ask for a loan for 50 million rands. That's beyond our lending criteria. Or they would come to SEFA to do a bottle store. It's part of our excluded sectors. So those are the things that I would encourage entrepreneurs to really focus on, which is your formulation of your business plan and cash flow projections. You need to be involved in it. I'm not saying that you need to be an expert, because, you know, some people are not experts. You know, some people are just operators. They want to operate the business. They know everything about it, but they're not perhaps eloquent at writing it down. That's fine, but you need to be involved in it. And
Sure.
Also, you need to pay attention to all the compliance criteria in terms of your tax compliance, your CIPC compliance, your annual returns, and all that. And then lastly, just educate yourself within all the different DFIs as to what do they fund and to what parameters. It will eliminate a lot of, you know, the back and forth and, you know, your frustrations from the applicant side and also from, you know, the DFI side, because it's not nice for us as DFIs to always give negative feedback. A lot of us who operate in this space are very passionate about entrepreneurship and development finance, and it's not nice to send that email that says, unfortunately, we can't assist because of ABCZ. Yeah, let me stop there.
Thank you, Bongo. Insight is noted, and those challenges definitely are some that can be addressed. I will chat about some of them later. Next, let's go over to Bongolethu from NEF. The same question with regards to the challenges that or hurdles that SMMEs typically encounter at your organization.
Yeah, thanks, Tobias. I think challenges are more or less similar to what Bongo has expressed. Maybe I just want to add one more thing to some of the stuff that is mentioned. When it comes to acquisition, one of the biggest stumbling block, I think, in my estimate, maybe based on what we've seen through our office, 90% of acquisitions fail because we cannot justify the price, right? Generally, entrepreneurs, when they approach us to finance an acquisition, the only thing they'll tell us is that the seller wants 6 million rands for his business. When you then start asking, how is that 6 million rands a market related price? Is that a fair valuation? then you don't get answers. I think, and because we cannot justify the price, it's absolutely impossible for any financiers, be it NEF or SEFA or even the banks in most cases, will be able to finance that business. And there are two reasons why it's important that we agree on the price, or we do some calculation that gives us comfort that the price is fair. One of those reasons is this. Remember, you're applying for a loan that the business must be able to repay. So we want to do affordability tests, right? We want to test whether the business can afford to service that debt. That's the one reason. The second reason is that we need to ensure and protect the applicant that comes to us, that they're not overpaying for the asset. So if you want to buy a business that's worth 1 million rands, you shouldn't pay a cent more than 1 million rands. You must pay exactly that, right? If the seller wants 2 million rands, tough luck. And if that's what they want and they're not willing to negotiate, then unfortunately our hand is forced. We have to reject that application because you're paying maybe twice what that business is worth. So those are some of the challenges that we do, and a lot of acquisitions, in most cases, acquisitions of good businesses that we really want to support, they fail because, or we reject them because the price is just not right. So that's one of the challenges. Also, going back to what Bongo was talking about, business plans. Yes, I agree with what you were saying earlier. The entrepreneur don't have to be well vested writing a business plan. They can outsource that function, but it's important that you engage with that document and understand it, and make sure that when you are sitting in front of a funder and you ask questions, you are able to provide adequate answers that will say to the funder, you know this business. That is very, very, very important. I cannot stress it much more. It's very critical, because when you are sitting there with me and you are unable to tell me why you think the business will make 1 million rands every month, then how can I rely on those numbers? Because that's what we rely on, those numbers, in order to make this investment decision. So if you just have numbers there and you can't articulate how they will be attained, what resources do you need? How will they be deployed? Who's going to buy the product or the service that you are providing in order to ensure that you get those revenues of 1 million rands? You can't articulate that. There is absolutely nothing that gives me comfort to rely on those numbers in order to make that investment decision to support you, to support your business. So it's critical, guys, that you engage with the document, you know, you understand it, and you keep, even if I wake you up at 3 a.m. in the morning, you can tell me how you're going to achieve a certain revenues and what it will cost you in order to achieve those revenues. That's very, very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bongolethu. I think that the common thread here is the business plan, if I'm understanding it correctly, and the lack of understanding of the content thereof from the applicants. Over to you, Siviwe. Would you say that that is a continued thread in your organization as well?
That used to be the norm, or the same challenge with the other two portfolios that are on hold. The business plan, where the consultant being appointed will just do the business plan by himself, and upon the completion, at the completion stage, where ECDC would then finalize the process, where they sit with the consultant and the business owners and find out that the owners don't know anything, or they don't understand at all what the business plan entails. So meaning that there was no communication between the two. Yeah. That was the challenge when we were doing those the other two portfolios which are on moratorium at the moment. However, the challenge with the current loan portfolios that we are funding at the moment is mainly based on funding viability. For an example, on a purchase order of supply and deliver, we compare the cost, the quote from your supplier that you're gonna buy those goods from, and what you tendered for with the department. So the difference there are the profit margins. The profit margins, they should cover our fees as well, as we charge 7% handling fee on the Nexus portfolio, and in addition to that, the SMMEs should make a profit then of let's say minimum 5%. And also the second challenge that the viability, it also goes for the contractors which are awarded contracts to construction projects, where because we assess the rates in the bill of quantities. Those rates should yield profit margins, and also the P&Gs, which is the preliminary general, which are the overhead running costs. They should also be priced at roughly about 10% of the contract sum, and the rates also in the P&G, in the BOQ, should make profits of about 10%. If that is priced, if the BOQ is priced like that, it is acceptable to us. We are comfortable to have a look at it. Another challenge is where the employer does not sign the session. We've got departments which are not signing the session. For an example, the correctional services, the SAPS, to name a few, they do not sign the ECDC session, and that causes and that's the reason that we will reject the applications, because our session is the only source of security. ECDC does not require a collateral, because of the understanding that the SMMEs, they do not have a strong financial background, and they live on the tenders. The tenders, you get a tender today, you can spend 6 months after that without any other tender. So they don't have constant cash flow from one contract to another. So yeah. And on the Imvaba Fund, the same is the business plan. The Imvaba Fund are strict on the business plan. They say the business plan must have a strong business case. And also on the industry, there are some challenges like the piggery. They say piggery is more especially on feeding. The costs are exorbitant there. And on the jobs fund, the challenge that we normally get is the applications, the applicants. When we look at the financial statement, the annual financial statements, because we start looking at the financials pre-pandemic, which is 2020, 2021, and 2022. We compare those, and we see that there is no distress or there are no signs of distress on the business. Some other businesses, the directors take a lot of money as loans without even the repayment terms, whilst they say the business is in distress, but they take out a lot of money out for themselves. And the escalating or the increasing, we also look at if they are increasing in major increases in the costs of doing the business. Why we interrogate there. If the increase is too much, we interrogate there. So those are the challenges that we normally pick up and revert back to the client. However, but if those challenges are addressed efficiently, then the application goes for approval. Yeah. Those are the challenges that the SMMEs that we are facing with the applications. Thank you. We are muted, Grant.
My apologies again. Thank you for that insight once again there, Siviwe. Now over to you, Shaun. The same question I'd like to pose to you. Challenges that SMMEs typically find themselves when submitting applications.
Yeah, I think we have the same hurdles from all the other funding institutions. And I think it's a common problem across the country in the funding world. And the one, I mean, we all know it's the literacy rate around putting these financial models, projections together, the compliance issues in terms of BE compliance and getting the right BE certification. I know these are SMMEs, so mainly they would have affidavits. One would also find, just to ask the question, where are the smaller accounting practices to help support these SMMEs to put this stuff together? So, you know, that's quite important as well. So you find a lot of these guys trying to apply, but they lack a lot of support in terms of the small accounting practices. What we also found, you know, when you do find these consultants and these small accounting practices, some of them know how to put some applications together that are a bit dubious as well. And a case in point with us, we were doing a couple of contract financing applications, and when we did our homework, I think about 7 out of 20 were fraudulent contracts. So one has to be very careful on how and when we look at these kind of applications and stuff like that. So there is those consultants out there that sort of prepare these contracts to try and get funding from funding houses, and there are some loopholes in the system. You also find these consultants help some SMMEs now, as the other previous speakers spoke, business plans are an issue. And you find these consultants helping some entrepreneurs with business plans, and they know how to sort of beat the system, etc., etc. When we go out to do a due diligence on the business, in the one case we found there's no business existing at all, there's no farm existing, but the paperwork was very sound, you know, very sound. It was good, the model was fine. The so-called SMME who was fronting had no clue what was going on the technical aspect of the farm. The title deed was in somebody else's name. So those are some of the challenges we pick up, you know, from the different consultancy trying to help these SMMEs, you know. But going back to the SMME problem, so what we also find is that financial statements are not well prepared, a lack of understanding on the financials. And now I sit on the IC as well. What we find is that people don't understand that financials need to talk, because in the absence of an SMME explaining the business and trying to sell the business, it's done through the business case, business plan, financials, cash flows, projections, etc. And if that can't win a committee member over, then it's a big problem. And in most cases, it's a lack of understanding on how to do that. So what we try to do, but keep it, we try to supply some sort of support on the business plan, but push more work to the SMME to do, because it's their case they have to sell. But we have consultants at the office trying to support SMMEs to understand how the business plan works, what we look at, how to populate it, and how to sell the business to a certain extent. But we don't try to do it for you, because then it's a bit of a problem, because we're actually selling somebody else's thing to ourselves, you know. And then one of the other thing is that when you find applicants applying for funding, there's a big expectation in the SMME environment that there's a big portion of grant, or it's only grant, and then it's time to start paying back the loan, and it's a big issue, and there's a problem, etc. So there's a big sort of sidekick around grants versus loans, and so forth. And when they're doing these projections, they don't actually project in their cash flows the repayment of the actual loan. So for example, you take a loan of X amount, the repayment is Y, and in their cash flow it's completely missing. You don't find all of that in there. So it's a distorted picture, and those kind of things sort of slow down the approval process. What we also find is that the track records of some of the SMEs are a bit bad, and with the National Credit Regulator, we have to look at the track record, and a big issue is the ITC listing, on bad listings and stuff like that. So we check all of that with us. So I'm sure the other entities do the same. And then it also slows down the process. We have to go back to the client and say, you are listed. How do we help you come out of that? I think one of the biggest major problems, apart from the business planning and the development, is the understanding of tax. And the tax problem is a major problem. You get income tax, provisional tax, VAT, and there's a company we assisted in one of our incubator models, exceptionally well-managed company from an operational point of view. They went from 12 million rand in construction work to about 80 million rand. When we then looked at the business financials, there were 4 years outstanding in VAT payments to the tune of 8 million rand, and tax and penalties are another 3 to 4 million. So it shows you can run a very good business, and you're applying for funding to expand. We found the companies in a huge tax problem, and you couldn't understand the difference between VAT, provisional tax, income tax, all those kind of stuff. But it is quite complicated, so it's always good to seek advice from the relevant accounting practices, or the smaller ones, or people like the CEDAs and the ECDCs in our business place, etc., where we also provide support at our centres on all these on these issues as well, and so forth. Yeah, I think it's very similar issues across the board from our perspective.
Thank you very much for that overview there, Shaun. The next question I'd like to put forward, I think this one would generally be similar across the board. To whoever's wants to answer this is one for the floor. Are you able to provide a list of compliance documentation that's required that SMMEs would typically need to apply for funding at any one of your institutions? I think Bongo.
Yeah. So Tobias, the obvious ones would be an application plan. An application form, a business plan, copies of IDCK documents for the entity that they will be using to operate the business, and any other FICA documents. Then there are additional requirements that will differ from one sector to another. So for example, if you are establishing a shopping center, right, you need approved documents, you need approved building plans. You have to compile a BOQ that must be done by an expert, a quantity surveyor. That's critical because we need to know that the funding you're applying for will be sufficient to build that shopping center, or any building, in fact, for that. It doesn't have to be a shopping center. It can be any type of business, office park, whatever the case might be. So you need to have architect approved building plans, you need to have the correct zoning, you need to have a BOQ done. You can go as far as coming up with an artist impression to see, just to show the look and feel of the building that you're trying to build. And for franchising, the document requirements will be different. You would need either a letter of approval or a signed franchise document. You'd need establishment cost done by the franchisor, because they are well versed in coming up with those, well versed in terms of coming up with the establishment costs. For a service station, there'll be slightly different requirements in addition to the business plans and all those kind of things. You would need to have a traffic count down. If it's a new site, it's a new build, you'd have a traffic count. You need to have your EIAs done. You'd need also costing done by the franchisor. So they vary, but there are standard documents such as your application form, the business plans, FICA documents, and so forth. Then there are other additional, depending on the type of business that you want to establish. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that insight there, Bongolethu. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Bongo? No, it's all good. I think that basically and typically covers all of the institutions. Am I correct? Is there something you'd like to add, Siviwe?
Yeah, for the supply and deliver, the order itself and the code for what you're gonna be supplying from where you're gonna be buying, and yes, of course, the all other FICA documents. For the contractors loans, we need the priced BOQ and the letter of appointment, where they both should talk to each other in terms of the value of the contract, and we assess the documents, the BOQ. Only after the assessment of the BOQ, if we find it to be viable, then we will then ask for the list of required documents, which will be the cash flow projections, the programs, and all the FICA documents as well. So yeah, that's it. And for the jobs, for the jobs fund, more importantly, the annual financial statements, which are coming from pre-pandemic up until now, the latest financials. And Imbaba Fund is the business plan and the FICA documents. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Shaun, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so with our fund, it's very similar to the other funds. So you have the set of statutory documents, which is, as the other speakers spoke about, CIPC documents, your compliance and BEE tax. We also bank statements, financial models, and statements, projections as well. And also then when you go into the different industries that like the others presenters have spoken as well. For example, if it's building something, you need to understand the CIDB levels according to their financials and the ability to construct. If it's a farm, what is the different health and safety? If it's growing sort of poultry, what is the health and safety issues around that, disease control? So it's all differently industry specific stuff that we'll ask as well. So if it's contract finance, we look at the purchase order, we've read the purchase order. If it's vehicles, we look at the quotes and what type of vehicles you're looking at buying. If it's machinery, what's the costing, where you're getting it from, etc. And we actually go and verify that these things actually happen. So once these things happen, then we actually go out and actually look at the vehicles and verify that they do exist, etc. So it's different industries. So the set of compliance, which all the other funders have to comply with, FICA, etc. Then the different industries obviously will dictate a different set of documentation, as I mentioned, CIBD, farming, health and safety for manufacturing, etc., etc.
Fantastic, thank you. Bongo, anything you'd like to add to that, or are you comfortable and it's covered in what the other panelists have covered?
Yeah, I think it's covered. It's covered, Grant. I've got nothing else to add.
No problem.
Because Mr. Bacela did say that there's certain industry-specific requirements that I think will be here the whole day if you have to go through every single industry.
Sure. No, noted. Thank you very much for that. All right. One next question. This is probably a burning question for everyone out there. Are there any business recovery funding that's available within any of your institutions that are represented here today? This one's open to the floor. I think it was mentioned previously. I think I speak under correction, Bongolethu.
Yes, we had a fund called Economic Distress Fund, which was aimed at assisting entrepreneurs that suffered as a result of COVID. The rate there, as I mentioned earlier, was 1.5 and limited to funding between 250 up to 10 million rands for various type of businesses. But I do believe that we've exhausted now that fund. It's no longer available. We are in talks with the DTI to try and secure more funding. And if we are successful in our efforts, then there will be, that information will be on our website. And I imagine that the terms will be similar to what I've mentioned. Other than that, we don't have any other economic recovery funds. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. Lastly, any advice, recommendations, or tips for our fund-seeking entrepreneurs out there who want to apply for funding, apart from, of course, visiting the business place to assist them with the applications from a compliance perspective? Let's take it from Siviwe. Any recommendations or tips for our fund seekers?
Is muted.
All right, let's move to you. So in the meantime, Bongolethu, any advice from yourself?
And this one might sound a bit cheeky, but I just want to say to the guys out there, don't go to a funder's office and get there and ask which businesses make money. There are a lot of people that come to our offices to inquire about funding, and the question that we often get asked is, tell me, chap, which businesses make money? So that just sends a wrong message. Go to a funder knowing exactly what it is that you want to do. We're there to also guide and support throughout the application process. If you come across as someone who's done their research and they know the type of businesses they want to start, you've done some groundwork. For example, if you want to set up a Shell service station, for example, you've already engaged Shell. They've given you their requirements. You met majority of those requirements, and you're now wanting to engage a funder regarding the funding process and that sort of thing. You're just increasing your chances of securing the funding. But if you go there saying, I don't know which service station I want which brand I want to go with, and I don't have a location earmarked, I haven't done any traffic study, then the conversation is not going to take you anywhere. It's not going to go forward. So maybe the parting shot is that people must do their own research. They must do the research, and they must want to start businesses in the sectors they really do understand. They know the intricacies of operating a business in those sectors. Because when you start communicating that to a funder, and we can tell that you know the business, you know the industry, you know the bolts and nuts of what drives that industry and what will drive your business, you're likely to be successful in securing the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Bongolethu. Bongo, any advice, pearls of wisdom from your side?
Yeah, I think Bongo has covered a lot of, Bongolethu has covered a lot of it, but I think from our side as well as SEFA, like I alluded to before, you need to just familiarize yourself with the kind of business that you want to get involved in. You need to understand the nuts and the bolts of it. Yes, don't come to the funders and say, what businesses can I apply for? I think you're putting the cart in front of the horse when you do that. And it doesn't create a conducive sort of discussion around how we can assist you. So I would say it's really, really vital. I can't emphasize this anymore. You need to do your own research, your own due diligence before you come to the funders. We are not experts as funders. I like to say we're jack of all trades, but not master of all. But our job is to interrogate business cases, and we do this on a daily basis. So you're not going to pull the wool over our eyes. You're not going to trick us into funding you. We will interrogate your business case, your business plan. Yeah. So you need to go into a funder's office quite sure of yourself that you know what you're doing, you know what you're applying for. And when you do that, you increase your chances of success.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. Lastly, Shaun, any pearls of wisdom from your side or advice for our entrepreneurs?
Yes, thanks, Grant. I think Bongo and Bongolethu has covered it quite nicely in terms of all the stuff that the funders look at. So it's quite well covered there. I think also it's important to note that obviously we highlighted a lot of the challenges in the funding process and the issues that the entrepreneurs are going through whilst looking for funding. And it's important to note for people out there are institutions available. I'm sure the MYDA, if I'm not mistaken, CEDA, the business place. They look into all these issues to try and help entrepreneurs, get their ducks in order. Business planning, compliance in most views, the CIPC, everything's online nowadays. So there's a lot of places that you can go to get your applications much more robust and more improved to look at the funding, to make it cross the line. So I think from a technical point of view, Bongolethu and Bongo's covered it quite nicely. But from the support, I think there's a lot of support out there where people need to start looking for that support because it is out there. We shouldn't just be going to funders ignorant and without all this documentation, but go to your support agencies and the services are there to help get over the line. Because remember, the idea of all this funding and all these institutions are to improve the economic situation of the entrepreneurs, to get jobs and get you over the line. It's not to try to prevent you, but we also have to do our homework when we're trying to get this funding, so it's very, very important from that perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shaun. Siviwe, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, Grant. Most importantly, the viability side of the business. The SMME must make sure the business is viable. When you price the BOQ, do it viably and don't underprice, because
not publishing that one.
The funding does not make the underpriced BOQ overpriced. And also on the supply and deliver orders, make sure that you have the enough buffer between what you got as a quote and what you charge. You submit as your bid amount to the employer, that there is enough buffer there to cover 7% ECDC funding, and also as for your profits, because every business has got profits to make as well. That's all.
Thank you for that. So costing is very important, if I can sum that up from Siviwe there. Right now, we'd like to go to the chat box and take some questions from the audience. The first question over there, we have an anonymous. Currently in the tourism and entertainment industry, currently expanding, importing, and have incurred costs to upgrade my existing park, which could have a strain on my cash flow. We would like to know, would you like at reimbursement of 50%, as cash in my business is critical? So I'm not quite understanding the question, but what I'm thinking it is that they're asking is, would it be possible for 50% of the cash that they've injected into their business would that be able to be recovered from any of the institutions that are present here today? I'll open it to the floor.
The answer is a straight no.
Okay.
Yeah. So generally what we look at financing is expansion of the business, startup of businesses, or replacing old machinery or equipment. So if this person is in tourism and wants to upgrade the business, maybe get a better star grading, that's what we can finance, provided that obviously they show commercial viability. But if they've invested money to start this business, we cannot reinvest them. That's their own sweat and blood. It must be in the business. And we like this kind of financing, this kind of businesses where the skin in the game, and the funders come in to share the financial risk with the entrepreneur that has started the business. We don't reinvest. I don't think any of the funders, I know they'll speak for themselves, but I don't think that's something they can do, reinvesting funding that has been injected by an entrepreneur. That we don't do. Thank you.
Right. I think I'll leave it to just one answer. I think that speaks for all the panelists that are present. We have a question from Pumi. Do you fund creative arts projects? I'll open that one to the floor as well.
I think let me take that one, Grant. We do fund creative arts projects, but there needs to be a commercial viability aspect to it. We funded quite a number of those through our TRAP program within our textile sector. So, you know, your fashion designers, your embroidery businesses, even people who do jewelry and the likes. So we do fund within the creative space in terms of the, you know, textile industry. I don't know perhaps what other creative industry they would be talking about. If you're talking about perhaps your filmmaking and things like that, unfortunately, we do not fund those. But within the fashion designing or textile space, we do fund those businesses.
Thank you, Bongo. Siviwe, do you have any response to that question with regards to creative arts projects? Are they funded by ECDC?
Yeah, I'm taking up from Bongo where he left off. The film industry. I must say, I'm not really clued up, but yes, there is a fund for the film industry from our TII Trade and Investment unit. If they are into that, I can refer to an official dealing with that in that unit.
Thank you very much, Siviwe. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Mpumi. We move on to the next question there, another anonymous. Does the Closing the Gap Fund consider emerging entrepreneurs for funding? Because we as startups struggle to get access to finance. I think that one is directed to yourself, Shaun.
Yes, so as we said, you know, we are supporting certain startups, but we have to demonstrate a good set of credentials whereby if you're starting up, you should be having some sort of work that you've landed, some contracts that we could fund. Just to fund a startup without any serious work, it would be a problem. So in most of in the funding world, startups are sort of not looked at as serious as the others because of the success rate of startups in our country. But we do look at startups, but as I said, it has to be a very credible application. It should have some sort of work that we can go and check and see whether it's viable as well, and so forth. So we can look at it, but as I said, it has to be a viable application.
Thank you, Shaun. All right, the next question, this one is addressed to the entire panel. What is the normal turnaround time to get a response on funding applications once an application is submitted? We always struggle to get a hold of the various offices for feedback, and people are still generally working from home because of COVID. I think that one I'll just open it up to the floor.
So Grant, while I'm on the mic, can I start?
Sure, please do go ahead.
Yeah, so from our point of view, right, so we're a bit of a private fund. So what we found is that if we can get all the application documents together, it's all sound and our due diligence team does it. We call a IC, and it can happen from from 0 to 2 weeks, the approval, but the documentation has to be all spot on in terms of meeting the whole full criteria list. Then we call IC meeting. So we can call an IC meeting every week, every 2 weeks. We're much quicker, but we have to get to that stage where the documentation must be up to speed in terms of the full list of requirements. So once we're at that stage, up to 2 weeks, we normally take. So we can have an IC meeting, we contract and we pay. Because our fund works like that. So every quarter we have to disperse X, Y, and Z. So that circle has to keep going. So if the SMME has all the paperwork in order, works with our team, from that time, once it meets that full set of the document pack, it can take 0 to 2 to 3 weeks the most from our side. Thanks. Oh.
Yeah, I think let me jump in as well. At SEFA, we've got a general turnaround time of about 6 to 8 weeks, but it depends on the product you're looking for. So on our TREP program, it's much quicker. It can be 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But on the bigger funds, you would imagine that a lot of due diligence must go in to that application to verify site visits, and also getting it through our credit department, through our legal department. With the bigger transactions, it can take a little bit longer, but generally it's 6 to 8 weeks, depending, of course, if the due diligence doesn't uncover items that we have to, dig deeper on, because sometimes that also does, increase our turnaround times when we do our due diligence and we find that perhaps what was reported on the business plan and in the cash flow is not as it was. Then we have to, go back and re-engage that. Also, what also makes the turnaround time take a little bit longer is also when we do, your background checks and credit checks on the entrepreneurs. Perhaps you find he's got a default there or a judgment there or some kind of pending litigation they have with somebody else. We'd require you to, sort those things out, or we seek our own legal department to see if your current legal issues are not going to affect SEFA or the proposed transaction. So yeah, we do try and give a very fast turnaround time, but it is dependent on transaction by transaction. Thanks.
Thank you, Bongo. Appreciate that. Bongolethu from NEF, over to you.
Similarly to SEFA, in a perfect world, it's supposed to be about 4 weeks to 10 weeks. But obviously, we don't live in a perfect world, so we don't get all the information we need in order to process these transactions as fast as we need to. So when submissions are made, generally, we notice that the applicants don't submit everything that we need, so we'd have to write back to them and request more additional information. But in cases where we receive all transactions, we try by all means to respond or conclude the process within 4 weeks to about 10 weeks. For big size transaction, obviously it takes a little bit longer because there are various committees now that get involved. So for example, at the NEF, we have about 4 different committees that approve, and each committee has different mandates. The first one, which is Fund Management Committee, approves up to 5 million rands. Then the next one would consider transactions between 5 million rands and 15. That's the EXCO Investment Committee. That's where the CEO and her executive members sit. And the next committee is called Board Investment Committee. They look at transactions between 15 and 50 million rands, and anything above 50 million rands goes to a Board of Trustees. Now, BIC, Board Investment Committee, and Board of Trustees are made up of external people. So they get called as and when there's a transaction to consider. Now, let's say someone is applying for 60 million rands. That transaction will not just skip all these other committees and go directly to the Board of Trustees. It will first go to FMIC, will then recommend, look at the transaction, make suggestions, and then recommend to the next committee, which is EXCO, will do the same thing, and then recommend to the next one, which is BIC, and all the way up until it gets to the final approving committee, which is BOT. That can take a long time. It can be 4 months, sometimes 5 months. It can be frustrating, understandably so, from an entrepreneur's point of view, but it's a necessary process that must be followed in order to ensure that the mandate of the NEF is not violated in any way, and the business that is being tabled in front of the BOT Board of Trustees is sound and is commercially viable. In terms of responding after you submitted a transaction, an application, we are required to respond within 3 to 5 days, acknowledging that application. Thereafter, would give the investment associate looking at the transaction another 5 to 7 days to assess and see whether all information that we require is there. If not, they are required to then write to the entrepreneur or the applicant, advising them of additional information that is required. So basically, I'm trying to say, we don't wait 3 months to respond. There will be constant communication advising the applicant where the business or the application is at any given point in time, and there's a dedicated person that they can contact in order to get more updates should the application wish to do so. So yeah, it takes about, in a perfect world, 4 weeks to around 10 weeks, but yeah, it can take longer, especially for big size transactions.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Bongolethu. Much appreciated. I'm sure everyone else appreciates that as well. Siviwe, over to you on your side, turnaround time.
The turnaround times will be on our side. On the Nexus, we give ourselves 2 weeks. Those are the supply and deliver. That's a quick one. Depending on the level of approval, some approvals which are up to 75,000, which is up to the regional level, they can even be quicker, much quicker than that. And others up to 500,000, they go up to the unit head. They don't go to the committee. So up to 500,000, it can be quicker than that. And anything beyond 500,000, then it goes to the first committee, which is Greek Credit Risk Investment Committee. So yeah, that one is a committee then that can take up to 2 weeks then. And on the workflow contractors, we understanding that. As per JPCC form of contract, the contractors are given 21 days to return back with all the required documents. So our aim is to beat that 21 days, provided that the contractor also give us a fair chance. He can go to the banks and all that, and also submit to us their application at first hand also. Because, you know, sometimes as they counting down the 21 days, they go to the banks and then they get declined, and then they come to ECDC on the 15th day and expect magics in that 6 days that is remaining. So we request the SMMEs to, as soon as they get the letter of appointments, approach ECDC, while you also approach the other funding institutions as well, so that we can work to beat the 21 days. Those are our time frames.
Thank you very much, Siviwe. We have another question. Lots of anonymouses today. Does NEF, ECDC, SEFA, and Closing the Gap Fund provide clients with business plan templates when applying through your various organizations? I'll open it up to the floor again. Bongo, if you'd like to maybe just respond to that from SEFA.
Yes, We do have a template, but it's really just a really basic template. It's not going to, in my opinion anyway, cover all the intricacies of your business. It's mostly applicable for your small, really small transactions, perhaps in the TRAP program, where you're looking for funding that is less than R1 million. I think that template will suffice. But anything bigger than that, you would imagine it needs a little bit more detail in terms of your business plan and your market analysis and things like that. So the short answer is yes, there is a template, but it's only really suffices for your smaller transactions. It is available on our website. You can download it on the SEFA website.
Thank you, Bongo. Bongolethu, over to you.
Yeah, so we also do have a template. It's on the application form. I think from page 4 to page 6, there is a template and a guideline that shows you what information must be covered under each section in your business plan. There is also on the website a business plan tool that applicants can download, and it will show you exactly what information must be in the business plans, and it will give you examples in terms of the questions they will ask. For example, under industry analysis, there's a list of questions that you definitely need to answer, but don't limit yourself to only answering the questions that are listed there. Provide more detail as long as it will assist whoever's looking at this application make an informed decision. So there is a business plan template, a business plan tool, sorry, on the website, and there's also a template or a guideline on the application forms from page 4 to page 6. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And then Siviwe, over to you.
For our loans, there is no business plan because they are contract based. It's just the letter of award and the price BOQ for the contractors, and the purchase order and the code for the supply and deliver. So no business plan required on those.
Fantastic. There's a couple of questions that has already been addressed by the panel. There is one that is for Bongolethu from NEF. Are there any offices in Port Elizabeth? And if so, can you provide relevant contact details?
No, not as yet. We only have an office in East London. It's in Berea. But we do assist. I mean, these days we do lots of virtual consultation with people. So I'm just going to post email addresses, office numbers on the chat box, and they can reach us should they wish to talk to our office. Thank you. But we don't have an office in East London as yet. Sorry, in PE.
No problem. Thank you very much. Noted. Just to the audience out there, just to inform them as well with regards to the previous question with regards to business plan templates. The business place does provide templates as well. We also have training for business plan development, and our audience can contact any one of our branches via our website. We'll provide that a little bit later. All right, I think the last question here, is there any assistance provided with trademarks and copyrights, as this process is expensive, especially for SMMEs? I'll open that to the panel, and that will be the last question that we take from the chat box.
Okay, and then let me go first.
Sure.
Regarding trademarks and copyrights or any pre-funding requirements, SEFA does not offer those. We require you to be funding ready. However, our sister organization, SEDA, can assist with those. So I would recommend that you contact your closest SEDA office. I don't know where the person asking the question is based, but SEDA's got quite a wide network of offices around the Eastern Cape.
Yes.
So just go to your closest SEDA office, speak to a business advisor. I do know that SEDA does provide assistance with your pre or your non-financial support in terms of helping you get your trademarks, copyrights, any kind of your industry regulatory kind of requirements like your SABS approvals and things like that. They can assist you with that.
Thank you very much. Bongolethu, do you want to add anything there? Nothing from any
Nothing. We also don't offer that kind of service. You must be funding ready when you approach our offices for funding.
Perfect. Thank you. Lastly, Siviwe.
Yes, that should fall under the business support, which is non-financial services in our unit at the ECDC offices. As I've mentioned, the regional offices and the what's this? Satellite offices. Regional offices are in PE, East London, Butterworth, Mthatha, and Queenstown. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we can round it up. We've taken all the questions from our chat box. So in our closing remarks to all our viewers, you have taken the first step to accessing funding by joining us here on this platform today. What needs to be done now is to follow through with your respective applications to these various organizations. The Business Place Network is standing by to receive you and to facilitate your funding applications from a compliance perspective and to ensure that your application is fully compliant before your application submission. This is to ensure that you and your partners stand a better chance of being successful in your funding application with respect to funding, with the respective funding institution. To our panelists, we thank you for your time and for joining us today in today's session and for enlightening the audience. And I'd also like to thank Emerge Digital Marketing Services for the production and of this panel discussion. Be sure to join us in the next panel discussion, which would once again be the last Thursday of the month, next month being the 28th of July, same time, same place, where we will discuss various training initiatives available for our SMMEs. My name is Grant Tobias for the Business Place Network. We had Shaun Govender from the Emerge Closing the Gap Fund. We've had Bongo Giyose from the SEFA, and Bongolethu Bacela from the National Empowerment Fund, as well as Siviwe Makasi from ECDC. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Till next time, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Tobias. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.